Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 153 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, college football fans and Husker fans.
Yes. Hello, everybody. We are College Football Throwdown, a father-son duo here to talk about college football by college football fans for college football fans. We were busy last week, so we weren't able to come to you between weeks 1 and 2 of college football. But we are here after week 2 to preview week 3 and talk about all the stuff that's happened. There's been a lot in the Nebraska world. There's been a lot in the national world. You know, coaches are being fired already. So there's plenty of drama as we get into college football season.
Exactly. And there's so much to talk about. And obviously we can't fit it all in, but we're going to do our best to hit the highlights.
That's right. And before we dive into all that, we're going to stick with our tradition and open up some cold beverages. I've got my Japanese Sapporo beer here.
Yes. Well, I have a Labatt Blue, one of my favorite beers from our friends up north. And something I really get to enjoy while I'm here in Michigan. And since we're about to leave to head to the God's country, you know, the good life here later this week, this is going to be some of my last opportunity. I might pick up one final case on the way out of town. So here's to our friends to the north and their ability to make a good beer.
All
Cheers,
right.
Labatt's Blue.
Cheers.
Yes.
And for those who are curious out there, God's country is, of course, referring to Nebraska. So that's where they're headed.
Yeah, of course.
As if it needed
anybody who's listened to. Exactly. Yeah.
It needed explanation.
Some good friends of mine did share with me just a few days ago that they were listening to the last podcast and really enjoyed it. So Alex, we got to keep plugging away, and they found it entertaining.
All right. I'll have to summon the effort to get through my despair at watching Nebraska football.
Yes. We need to talk about that, but we'll do that on another occasion.
Well, let's start with some good news on the Nebraska front. So just after we recorded our last podcast was the Nebraska volleyball game, the Husker Day, where volleyball day, where they played a game against an Omaha team within the Memorial Stadium, the football stadium, with the goal of breaking a world record for highest attendance at a women's sporting event. And you and Mom and my sister all got to go to the actual event to see it in person. And you were part of the 92,000 people who were there that broke the record on that historic night. So tell us what it was like.
Well, Alex, it was called Volleyball Day in Nebraska. It was kind of billed once they, created the event. It was billed as an event, a celebration of volleyball and its special place in, the Nebraska culture. So all the teams involved, and there were 4 teams that played, were part of the Nebraska collegiate system, right? 2 of them were Division II, and then 2 of them were Division I. And of course, the big marquee matchup would be, University of Nebraska Lincoln against University of Nebraska Omaha, 2 Division I schools. And it was just an event that took an enormous amount of resource and effort to pull off, but they were able to do it. Amazingly, they effectively sold out the primary stadium seats in about 48 hours, which is just incredible. So it went from them hoping to break a record that prior to that event was around 18,500 people. And within 48 hours, they had sold about 86,000 seats. So pretty remarkable. And then they ended up opening up the floor so that they could get a few more people in there. And they didn't know whether they would get to that world record, but as time approached, the date approached, they began to become more confident that they were going to get there. And ultimately, they did end up breaking it by about 600 or 700 people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I was watching the game on Big Ten Network And it was awesome seeing those pictures like overhead of the stadium just chock full of people.
Yeah.
And I saw it. I asked some of my other friends here in LA about it afterwards, and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, I saw the news about that." So the word definitely got out, and it got some great
Oh yeah.
traction for the university.
Absolutely, it's going to have a huge impact. I mean, it really did. It crossed the boundaries of Nebraska college sports and really extended into a globally significant event. I mean, it got attention all over the world, and it really was remarkable. I would have to say that having attended quite a number of college football games there in the stadium, this would fall into my top 5 of all time. It was really an incredible environment to be a part of, and then all the festivities after the volleyball game was over were equally fascinating. And I just have to give a ton of credit to Trev Albers and the entire staff at the university that organized this, because I think they executed it about as well as you could execute an event of that magnitude, and they did it to a degree that shocked, I think, just about everyone who attended. Like everybody seemed to just be sitting there nodding their head like this is incredible, whether they were from one of the other schools or the players and fans of University of Nebraska Lincoln. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a great success, and so happy that Emma got to be there and be a part of it. And the actual official number was 92,003 people. So we like to say that it was the 3 of us that put it over the 92,000.
I like that.
So
I like that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. No, and thankfully like the weather was good, right? Cuz if given
yeah,
how pretty close we were to the record, like you say, it was only like 500, 600 people that really took us over.
right.
So if the weather had been poor, we definitely would not have done it, I don't think.
No,
Um,
no, we would
so we
we
were
would have we would
fortunate.
have easily got we would have easily gotten the record for volleyball. I
Right.
mean,
But
that
not,
was a no brainer. As long as we had the event in the stadium, we were going to be fine there. But yeah, we wouldn't have broken a world record.
yeah. Yeah. And, the game itself was fun to watch. Not super competitive. The main Nebraska
Right.
team dominated each of the sets that were played, I would say, which you would expect because obviously they're, much more talented team and are hoping to potentially compete for the national championship this year. So did you have any thoughts about the team specifically?
Oh, I'm really excited about our volleyball team this year. They're very young, and so that youth is going to probably lead to a few failures, a few losses, and things like that as the season progresses. And we may or may not be in that contention group as we approach the end of the season. But I'm very excited about our future, and it's a team that's a lot of fun to watch. But in reference to your comment about the opponent, which was University of Nebraska Omaha, there was some commentary from some quarters about that and saying, "Oh, I wish they had put a more legitimate opponent." Well, the last time we had played University of Nebraska Omaha in 2021, the game went 5 sets.
Right.
It went the distance. So it's not like this is a team that doesn't have some historic talent to it. The University of Nebraska Omaha has been in the NCAA tournament. Has competed and is typically first or second in their conference almost every year. And so, that was pretty competitive. And frankly, if we had a big matchup like, say, University of Texas or University of Kentucky or somebody like that in this matchup, and then the weather had been more questionable, or even in the weather that we experienced, I mean, both teams talked about how hard it was to deal with the wind. As perfect as the weather was, it still wasn't, without wind. So if that had ended up influencing a significant game that changed the direction of who got home court advantage for the NCAA tournament, people would have been critical of Nebraska for having put themselves or the other team in that situation, right? It would have been better to have a normal game, quote, quote.
Right.
So I think this was perfectly executed as an event. And it also gave a concentration of money then to all the Nebraska schools. I think it was perfectly selected and executed, and I would argue that to my death.
Yeah, and like we said on a previous podcast, it's kind of a celebration of women's volleyball across the state of Nebraska, not just University of Nebraska Lincoln. So
Correct.
that was another aspect of it.
Yes.
Now, switching from the success of the volleyball team and all the positive feelings there to the Nebraska Minnesota football game, which was the following day. We gave our predictions for that Nebraska Minnesota game on our previous podcast, and I predicted that Minnesota would win in a close game 21-17, while you predicted that we would win in a higher scoring close game of 34-31. And unfortunately, my pessimism ended up being correct because they beat us in a low scoring game of 13-10 in a game where we very well should have won if we were able to actually convert on offense and not turn the ball over.
Right. A very common theme, and sounds like an echo from previous years. We clearly have still not overcome our issues with being able to produce a complete offensive team that can do just the basic stuff correctly. It's just remarkable to me that we now find ourselves in a situation where we have a quarterback who has a fundamental flaw and we have no backup that we can go to now that this reality has exposed itself. So that's a sad deal for us as Nebraska fans, knowing that, it looks like we have a few components to a good, not great, but a good football team. But those components will probably have to suffer through a number of losses due to the fact that we have certain components in our team that aren't able to do the basic things they need to do to secure a victory. And that is not turn the ball over, not make stupid penalties.
Right. Well, and actually, yeah, if you look at the stats, like in terms of passing, we were 11 of 19 for 114 yards. So, we weren't getting a lot on the passes. But, we were completing them at a reasonable rate. It just then when you look at that 3 next to the stat sheet for the 3 interceptions, which were all very poorly timed and gave them short fields that allowed them to score pretty quickly in situations where our defense otherwise did a good job of slowing them down. We held them to only 55 yards rushing the whole game. They had more success passing it against us, especially later on in the game. And we got 3 sacks on their quarterback as well. They got 3 sacks on us in return. So, it was, once again, it was a competitive game, a game we should have won, and I do put some fault on the coaches, for example, for how they mismanaged the clock near the end of the second quarter. Right. They, instead of taking a timeout when they could have to retain, the 20 seconds we had, we tried to go hurry up, which led to us false starting. And then I believe on the following play, Sims threw a pick in the end zone, right, that took away any possibility of us even getting a field goal there. So there were situations like that where I was critical of the coaching staff. But at the end of the day, you just can't turn the ball over. And that falls on Jeff Sims and then also on Anthony Grant, who we knew had a problem with turning the ball over in practice. And in the fourth quarter, when we couldn't afford it, he coughed it up again.
Right, exactly. And see, to me, that is, certainly it falls on Anthony Grant to correct his problem. But at the same time, it falls even more directly in that situation on the coaching staff and specifically the running backs coach, that his job is to manage his room, is to manage his position. And he should never, ever have had Anthony Grant out there in the field at that time, given the history that he had, during practice with his fumbling. You just don't do that. So I put that all on our running backs coach.
Yeah. And one thing that I was frustrated with the defense was that we would do a nice job of doing what we're supposed to, keeping them to short gains on first and second down, force them into a third and long situation. But then many times they're able to convert that third down. I'm looking here. They were 8 of 17 on third downs. So 17 goes to show you how many times we got them to third down, right? And they converted a little less than half.
Right.
I think we got better on that in the second half, but especially in the first half, I noticed it was happening a lot where we were giving that
Right.
up.
Well, and frankly, it's one of those things where that's one of the concerns I have about our defensive scheme, which is an aggressive style scheme, and because you have very few really big bodies in there, right? With a 3-3-5, a lot of time you're only going to have three really big, large humans on that front group, right? And so because of that, you have to do a lot of stunting and gap attacking and things of that nature that works great when you guess right, but when you guess wrong or you don't get home, meaning they pick up, your movement, and then you're not able to get to the quarterback in time, then you're leaving your secondary out to dry, and they're eventually going to get somebody open. And there's just too many people running wide open. We're still making too many mental errors in the secondary, and those lead to, big conversions where we're 3rd and 18 and they get 22 on
Right.
3rd down.
Right. And to give Jeff Sims credit, he was our leading rusher, I believe, in that game. We were able to use his legs effectively on multiple occasions. Sometimes he scrambled out of bad situations to get a positive gain. And then he threw, a good medium range, short to medium range passes, right? That had some zip on them that, got a first down and that sort of thing. However, it's clear that his long ball is not there, is not at all accurate. And then his choices under pressure, also not great because of the 3 interceptions, obviously.
Right. And even his arm strength, I and accuracy, either our coaches do a very poor job of evaluating that in practice, which I don't believe is the case, or he does better in practice than he did in these first 2 games, meaning it didn't translate, right? Because if he was having the inaccuracy problems that he's demonstrated in these first 2 games with his passing, then they would have been talking about other options at quarterback. It wouldn't have been so. They wouldn't have been so invested in Jeff Sims as our starter. So I'm convinced that he physically can throw the ball accurately, and when he's doing his mechanics properly in the relaxed atmosphere of a typical practice, it seems he must do that. But then he's now demonstrated that when you get into a game situation, he tightens up. His motion isn't the same. His progression isn't the same. His decision making isn't with the same crispness and speed, and everything it falls apart.
Right.
And that's not that happens to players. It just does. There are players that are primetime players, and there are players that aren't. So
Yes.
he just might be one of those athletes that's a physical freak, but doesn't have the mental fortitude to be able to perform the same way he practices.
Mm-hmm. And then one thing that happened after our most recent podcast, it was actually the day after, I think, was that our tight end Eric Gilbert was arrested for burglary. So obviously that wasn't great for our kind of wide receiver room. And then also Isaiah Garcia Castaneda tore his ACL in that first game and is out for the season. So those were 2 things we were carrying with us into this Colorado game, where, of course, Colorado had a huge upset win over TCU in week 1 and was the talk of the town. And my earlier prediction on the previous podcast where I said I thought we would lose to Minnesota but win against Colorado, I was going on the assumption that Colorado would be like us and struggle, being under a first-time coach, and adopting a new system, all that stuff, and that they would lose to TCU. Obviously, I was wrong about that, so I was definitely predicting that we would lose this Colorado game, and I was surprised that the spread was only minus 2.5 on game day for Colorado, because I knew they would beat us bigger, and then they did.
Right. Well, and actually, it's interesting. You may recall my predictions were that I was hopeful that we would beat Minnesota, and I felt like we had a really good chance to just based on what I believe Minnesota's team is going to be, right? But we again made so many mistakes to make it virtually impossible for us to win the game, even though we were winning up towards the until the end, of the game. We didn't play in a manner that teams have to play to win games, right? If you have all those turnovers, usually you're going to lose, even if you're the better team physically. And we demonstrated that for the umpteenth time in the last 4 or 5 years. So that's number one. But I also said that if we lost that Minnesota game in that, especially in that kind of a fashion, that it would lead to a hangover loss in Colorado. And then when I saw Colorado's performance at TCU, I expected the Colorado-Nebraska game to be an absolute blowout. So frankly, the first half and really the first 2.5 quarters of the Colorado game, I was feeling pretty good about what we were doing, because we were still in it, right? We were within striking distance, and we were doing things, frankly, better than Colorado. Our defense had done phenomenally, I thought, in the first half of keeping them down, but just gave up a couple of big plays, and then the rest of it was just gifts that we kept giving them in the form of turnovers.
Right.
And you can't do that. You're not going to beat a team if we had played them straight up. If it was equal number of turnovers, they had 2 and we had 2, for example, then that game's a nip and tuck game to the end. But because you turn it over as many times as we did, it's not even a chance.
Right. Well, and also, right, the timing of the turnovers and all that sort of stuff, right as
location on
we're
the field.
within field goal range, we turn the ball over and things like that.
Right.
And I would agree with you. I was frustrated watching the game, obviously, but I was very impressed with our defense. We ended up getting 8 sacks over the course of the game on their quarterback, and that aggressive style was definitely being shown off, and we were confusing them. And I thought as well that perhaps those few extra days of prep, because we did play our first game on a Thursday, whereas Colorado played on a Saturday, so we had a couple extra days to prep for them than they did for us. So I thought that might be, coming to effect. You'll remember the very first offensive drive we had was a successful one where Jeff Sims was passing it well, and we were driving the ball down the field on them, only to then turn it over, of course, and kill that momentum. But yeah, I would say the Colorado game, which we lost 36-14, was an even more stark contrast of the strengths and weaknesses of our team, and that we saw the strengths clearly of our defensive players. I definitely see improvements in terms of tackling. There were a number of tackles that we made in open space or tripping up a guy's, feet as he ran by, to stop him from getting the edge and stuff like that. Definitely improvements over the Scott Frost era there. However, on the offense, Jeff Sims had a lot of problems, both with interceptions as well as even on snapping the ball at the right time. You recall there was a play where he snapped it as our player was running across in front of him, and the ball hit that guy and fell on the ground, and thankfully he was able to dive on it and prevent another fumble, but it very well could have gone over to the other team. So there were a few turnover situations that were almost for us that didn't happen, that would have made the score even worse.
Right.
So it was a rough situation, and I was frustrated, as I know you were, because we were texting, that near the end of the second quarter, after Sims had thrown another pick or whatever, that the coach didn't sub him out for our second team quarterback, Harburg, and give him some time to recollect himself mentally, because then he sent him back out on the next series where we got the ball, and what did he do? It was another turnover, and it was like, well, what did you expect to happen?
Well, and he was doing other things too. I mean, early in the game, one of his early turnovers was a snap that you could argue was maybe slightly low, but was very, very fieldable. And he bobbled it, and then the ball bounced forward in front of him, and he went forward and reached out to try to grab the ball, and literally with one hand, rather than just diving on it and curling up and accepting the 4-yard loss or whatever, he tried to grab it so he could pick it up. So you know what I mean? Like he was bending
Yes.
over. You don't do that. You dive to the ground and curl up in a ball and protect that football. Forget about the play. Once that ball's on the ground, it's a oblong spheroid, man. It is not a round ball. It bounces weird. You don't ever try to pick it up. Don't ever do it. Okay. And especially with our history, that has to be the instruction. And the fact that he didn't do that, either the coaches had never coached him on, hey, if this happens, this is what you do. And they should have practiced it, right? There should have been a time in spring practice where they literally went through a process where they threw the ball on the ground and they had the quarterbacks land on it and curl up and protect it. They're running backs doing the same thing. Listen, if you fumble the ball, this is what you do, right? This is how you recover a fumble. Don't worry about, oh, gee, I've screwed up this play or whatever. Doesn't matter. At that point, the most important thing is that we secure possession of the ball and we can then deal with whatever the negative consequences are of some lost yardage. But the consequences of that turnover, way bigger deal, right? Way
Yes.
bigger deal. And you know what? As I'm looking over the summary of the press conference today as we are approaching the next game, and I didn't realize this, but Chubba Purdy has been dealing with an injury the past few weeks, which is part of why Harburg was so obviously the second quarterback. That Chubba was struggling with injury, and so Harburg had emerged as the number 2 quarterback on the depth chart because obviously Chubba isn't playing as well. It doesn't sound like he's like hurt so that he can't play at all, but he's injured enough that it's affected his performance at practice.
Right. Well, because obviously later on in the game, Jeff Sims went out of the game with an ankle injury after a sack. And Harburg came on, and then Harburg had his helmet taken off, so he had to go out for one play, and Chubba did come out and threw kind of a loopy bad pass that was incomplete, and then Harburg came back out. I hadn't heard that either, so that does kind of explain our current depth chart, and it makes our situation even more precarious if we have 2 quarterbacks who are currently banged up, so we really only have one current option.
Right. And we've done a few podcasts over the course of the summer and since the spring game, and in the post spring game time frame is when we had 2 scholarship quarterbacks depart the roster. Coach Rule made a decision at that time not to pursue any additional portal quarterbacks. Right at the time, we were still heavily in the mix, chasing the number 1 football player in the rankings, so to speak, Dylan Raiola, at that time. And I think Coach Rule was not wanting to distract or change the appearance or structure of our quarterback room in a way that might negatively affect our chances at securing Dylan's commitment. And so I have a feeling that he was considering a lot of things when he made the decision not to pursue another portal quarterback. And now, as it's played out, Dylan didn't choose us, obviously. And now here we find ourselves with literally 3 scholarship quarterbacks on our roster, and 2 of them are hurt.
Right. Which, yeah, it was odd to me that, like, when Sims, had to be helped off the field and stuff, because, like, the tackle was a pretty standard, his legs kind of got caught from behind him as he was running to pass the ball sort of thing. It didn't look like anything more serious. And now I know that's not a, medical assessment, right? You don't know what's going on underneath and everything like that. And clearly there was something more serious going on there. But it's definitely worrying because at least with our past quarterbacks, right, like Adrian Martinez or even Casey Thompson, typically we would get into the mid-season at least before they went out hurt, and we had to sub in a second-team quarterback. But now we're having to do it from week 1 or from week 2 rather. And even then, like, we've had some quarterbacks that are certainly prone to turnovers in the past years, but I think Jeff Sims takes the cake in terms of like how many turnovers we've already had and how preventable some of them have been, right? Like the one you mentioned about, him not jumping on the snap right away and things of that nature. So I mean, I was honestly almost wondering if it's maybe a blessing in disguise that we're playing Harburg, for this upcoming game against Northern Illinois, and that if he's getting the practice time, and getting time to be like, okay, I am the quarterback. I need to lead this team. Let's change the playbook a bit to play to his strengths. He's obviously more of a runner than a passer, even than Jeff Sims is. So let's figure out how we can make that work. And even if Harburg is objectively not as skilled as Sims in, the passing game or as an overall quarterback, if he's not coughing up the ball as much, I would see that as an improvement.
I would agree, because I think, especially against these next two opponents, we should, keyword being should, have athletic superiority at not only in the skill positions, but also at the lines of scrimmage, right? Even as bad as we might be along the offensive line in recent years, the fact is that the talent we're starting with is at least equal to that of Northern Illinois and next week Louisiana Tech. So this is a window of opportunity now for us to stabilize ourselves and build some confidence over these next 2 weeks. And that's what we need to do. We need to simplify our game plan and, like you say, play to the strengths of our quarterback and just go out there with the primary goal of execution. Just go out there and do your jobs.
Right.
Just, guys, be Division I football players and we'll be fine.
Right. And going back to the Colorado game, obviously we had 4 turnovers in the game, while Colorado had 1 very late in the game when the outcome was already decided, which led to our touchdown score at the end of the game. But if you look at the stats, we did a good job rushing it. We had 41 rushes for a total of 222 yards, while they had 33 for only 58 yards. So we really shut down their rushing game totally. But then obviously they were able to figure out how to pass it against us. They got several big pass plays off where their talented athletes were able to get some space and get some big yards. So they had 396 total yards on passing, while we had 119.
Right.
And we were 11 of 22, so right at 50% in terms of completions, for a total of 341 yards, while they were at 454.
Okay.
So, and in terms of penalties, right, we had 6 for 40, while they had 9 for 80. They had a lot of both false start penalties as well as unsportsmanlike conduct penalties and things like that. So they weren't playing, their cleanest either. I would say they weren't playing as clean as they were against TCU. And yet, we were able to make trouble for them, especially in the first half with our defense. But eventually, the defense was being out there so much, and they kind of lost their steam, I think, as the game went along. It was clear we weren't going to win, and the offense kept putting them in bad situations. But it did give me some highlights of hope for the season, and that I think we can, especially against some of the more, mid-tier Big Ten teams, that we can slow them down offensively and give them some trouble with this defensive scheme we have, the 3-3-5. But obviously the big gaping hole is the offense and the quarterback, because if we can't, score, then it doesn't matter.
Right. And the thing is, we also find ourselves in a situation where we really don't have a difference maker at wide receiver or at running back. We have good players at those positions, guys that are solid, right? And they're either too young and have not yet had the opportunity to emerge as difference-making talent, or they just haven't demonstrated it yet. And we had a fairly interesting and challenging draw to begin the season with 2 Power 5 opponents, including 1 conference opponent. And where you look around the country and you're not going to find a lot of schools that have played, 2 Power 5 football teams in their first 2 weeks, right? If somebody played a big time opponent in the first week, they probably played something of a lesser opponent in this past week. So we didn't do ourselves any favor in how we scheduled with this non-conference season this year. So, but now we have a chance to push the reset button and kind of say, okay, things didn't go our way here early in the season, but we've now established that we can play some pretty decent defense. And our kicking game, although not great because we did miss a field goal this past week in the Colorado game, is pretty solid. Our punter has done quite well through 2 games, right? And the kickoffs have done reasonably well. So, there's some elements there that you can look at and say, okay, those appear to be fairly solidified. Even our punt return game is clearly better than it has been in years. I feel good about a lot of those things. I just need the detail and the locking in by our assistant coaches needs to be better. And I will give them a little bit of a pass because it's a new staff. They're getting together and they're communicating for the first time with each other, and so they're making a few of those first time type of mistakes. Okay, I get it. They're human, but that needs to tighten up now. Those details better be being discussed by Matt Rule and his staff. If we continue to see the basics of football not understood by our players, then that falls to the coaches. And so to me, my measure as I watch the team over these next 2 to 3 games is going to be in what is the level of clean execution that we get in all phases of the game, and what then is the end result. I think if they did that against these next 2 opponents, we should come out victorious. Now, the third one, obviously being Michigan, that isn't quite going to do it, but at least we would come into the game with a level of confidence and a recognition that we can execute.
Right. Because, yes, the next 2 games against Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech, both at home as well, whereas these first 2 games against Power 5 teams have both been away, adding to the difficulty. Right. I agree that this is our time to stabilize, to figure out what we're doing at quarterback, to get some confidence under the belts of these players. And then we have the game in Michigan, like you say, which is probably going to be a brutal loss, but we can accept that. And then we have a stretch of at Illinois, home with Northwestern, home with Purdue, which are all, teams that have beaten us in recent years, but definitely winnable. And we have at Michigan State after that, which we'll talk about later. They're obviously going through some chaos this year, so I'm not convinced that that's a automatic lose. So we have some games coming up where we can reestablish ourselves and actually get, over 4 wins, for once. That would be nice. So that's the hope I'm clinging to. But it all comes down for me to the quarterback situation, because depending on who's hurt, and are they playing well, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, if we really lose both Sims and Chuba, for whatever reasons, because their injuries get reignited or whatever, and we're stuck with Harburg, and Harburg can't step up to the task. I mean, we've literally got no one behind him. So then we're really in a pickle.
Yep. Oh, I know. So I'm 100% in agreement with you, Alex. Again, I think I've seen the glimmers of hope in every area, even the wide receivers. I mean, they did some great blocking over these first couple of weeks. There's been some good possession catching. Our Fedone got a tight end, touchdown pass there, that last touchdown in the Colorado game. So, I mean, there's glimmers of hope that we can start to build off of that. And I just want our coaching staff to look inward to themselves and say, okay, what do we got to do to get these kids to not make mistakes?
Right.
It's not about, hey, let's execute faster. Let's execute this, better. That's not rule number 1. Rule number 1 is let's eliminate the mistakes. Let's take care to the nth degree ball security. Let's make our decision making be clear and crisp. And as a coaching staff, let's make sure that our rotation of players makes complete and 100% sense to the situation. You have to be on the ball totally locked in all the time for 4 quarters.
Right.
Okay. And if you do that, then you're going to win.
Right. And also to mention one other aspect of our team, the offensive line, I'm still concerned about their pass protection because there were many times that either Sims got sacked or he was forced to go on the run, on various plays. But on the other hand, we were able to have a lot of success rushing the ball, and you don't have that unless your offensive line is making some, progress there. And like the nice big touchdown run we had in the third quarter, I believe it was, they made a huge hole for Sims, and he took off and showed off his speed and ran down the field for a touchdown. And at that point, we were still within striking distance in the game, right? It was still a live game, and I was hoping that would increase the confidence of Sims on the team. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But I'd say that the offensive line is improved from what we saw last year. Now there's still some problems for sure that I would like to see us work on in these next 2 games. But like you say, there are glimmers to hang on to.
Yes, exactly. Well, and again, as I look over the comments from Coach Rule during his press conference, he accepted responsibility. He took the accountability to say, "Hey, I did a poor job of preparing, the team in certain specific areas, like preparing for the crowd noise, things of that nature. And we want to win badly. We know we're not doing the things we need to do to win." And he's taking that and saying, "Hey, we got to get better." And when he says we, he's talking about his coaching staff. So I don't think there's any problem with where Matt Rule's head is at. Okay, and he's going to just keep grinding and keep trying to get better. And I could still see a progression through the season if we were to be blessed with maybe a little bit of good health with our team. We haven't been blessed up to this point, but if that stabilized and we were able to get through, these next few games without a bunch of critical players being booted for the rest of the year because of injury, then we have a chance to really build some depth and become a solid football team by the end of the year.
Right. And so now thinking about this Northern Illinois game, they are a MAC school. They're currently 1-1. They lost last week against Southern Illinois, their rival. And we've been told that Jeff Sims has an ankle injury, and he did not practice on Sunday. We're recording this here on Monday. It is September 11th. His progress is day to day, according to the coaches. So we don't know for sure if Jeff Sims is going to be the quarterback or if Harburg's going to be the quarterback. Personally, I would, as I mentioned earlier, I would lean towards just go with Harburg, give him his chance. Let Sims rest, A, it'll give him time to heal his injury, and B, give him some time to get some things figured out mentally, maybe do practices with the center, off on the sidelines or whatever. Just do what he needs to do to not make all these turnovers happen. And I'm hoping that we come to Lincoln, Nebraska, and that we still struggle. I don't suddenly think all of our mistakes are going to go away, but I think our defense will do a good job of slowing them down. And I'm hoping that our offense will do a bit better than we've seen so far. And so we'll win in a pretty close game of 21-14.
Wow. Okay. So here's my thing. I think Sims is going to start. I think he'll end up practicing. He didn't practice on Sunday. That's basically the first practice of the week, and it's kind of a fairly light practice. They are off on Monday, so the team didn't even practice today. And I have a feeling that by tomorrow, Jeff will be taking some snaps. Maybe he won't. Maybe it'll be a 50-50 thing, and between he and Harburg tomorrow. But by Thursday, Jeff is going to have the reins again at starting quarterback, and I kind of agree with that. Just in that, rather than having him stand back and watch against this lesser opponent, I think you try to seize the moment against this lesser opponent and allow him to build some confidence. Now, if he goes out there against this perceived lesser opponent, Northern Illinois, and he continues to have the same mental mistakes, then it's a much easier decision as the coach to say, okay, I gave you ample opportunity to respond as an athlete needs to respond at this level, and you didn't. So now I'm going to go to Harvard, right? So I have a feeling that if Jeff can go, he's going. But it wouldn't shock me if he's got a pretty quick hook, if his performance isn't way better than it's been, in particularly in the area of ball security. So I am predicting, because I really do believe Matt Rule's going about this in the right fashion, that I want to believe that Sims is going to respond at some point. He's going to respond, because much like his games at Georgia Tech, he had some games where he looked like an NFL star, right? Because he's a freak athlete, and I think this is an opportunity for him to have a game like that that would help start to build a platform of confidence for him. So I think Matt's going to try to take advantage of that, and I hope that Satterfield is smart enough to put a game plan together that allows that to happen, and we end up scoring quite a few points. I'm going to say we score 35 points or maybe even more, but I'm going to go 35-17 Nebraska.
All right. I like that. I hope you're right. All right. So now switching over to some national talk. Obviously, there's been some big news in the world of college football over these past 2 weeks. And one of the big ones, which relates to something we talked about on a previous podcast where we were talking about conference realignment and the possibility of Stanford maybe coming to the Big Ten because of their great academics and things like that. But now it is official that the ACC is accepting Stanford, California, and Southern Methodist University into their conference. So that would raise them up to 18 total members, which leaves the Pac-12 with only 2 remaining.
Right. Pac-12 is down to 2. Now, the ACC, they don't have 18 members. They're only adding 3.
I looked it up. It said with these additions, it's 18 total, 17 football schools if you're not counting like Notre Dame, right? Because Notre Dame's part of the ACC, but not in football.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Now I get it. Okay. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So obviously that puts a hole in the hole, Stanford coming to the Big Ten and Notre Dame maybe joining in kind of theory that we were positing. So that's probably not going to happen. Right. We can assume that Stanford reached out to the Big Ten, and the Big Ten probably wasn't looking to expand further. They were ready to stay put with what they got.
Well, and I think everybody's probably going to stay put now until they see the dynamics of what happens with the ACC over the next few years, and what their next negotiated media rights deal is, because the Big 12 just recently agreed to a new one, the Big 10 just recently agreed to a new one, and the SEC's is outstanding. So the ACC is the only one. It depends on what they're able to get the next time they have to go to the table.
Right. But as you mentioned, right, the ACC doesn't go to the table until like 2036 or something, right?
Well, yeah, but I wonder if the addition of these three schools might prompt some negotiation, right, between their media partners, which is primarily ABC, ESPN, right? So it would be a matter of whether or not, to keep the ACC viable, that ESPN doesn't step to the plate and say, "Hey, okay, guys, we're willing now that you've brought these other schools in to have an open discussion about where we might be able to go." That's a two-edged sword, obviously, because ESPN would almost ultimately be asked to pay more, and why would you do that for something you already have under contract? But the answer is so that the entity doesn't go away.
Right, because we've heard rumblings that Florida State and maybe even Clemson and some of the other schools might be looking to leave. And I read something that said that if the ACC goes below 16 schools, like they do have to renegotiate the contract, and like the current payout wouldn't apply. So part of the thinking
would go lower.
Part of the thinking was, well, they added these new schools, so now even if those schools do leave, they're still at 16, right? So
that's right.
There might be some strategy there.
Well, but if you're ESPN, do you want to pay more than what you're already paying for the addition of a Stanford University, which has great prominence and and prestige academically, but frankly is not a prominent athletic property, right? It's not something that brings eyeballs to the advertisers for ESPN or ABC, right?
Right.
So they're not going to pay for that.
Yeah.
And and Cal is even worse. And SMU has the potential to bring some eyeballs, but nothing compared to, justify the average pay that they're already getting. So none of those three properties is going to enhance the per team dollars that an ACC can get in negotiating a TV contract.
Right. And speaking of which, the now Pac-2, the two remaining schools, which are Washington State and Oregon State, they have sued the organization, the Pac-12, because apparently in the media deal or in the contracts or whatever, there was a stipulation about how schools could announce their withdrawals from the conference, and they're basically saying that these other schools that have all left announced too early, and affected their profitability and their ability to negotiate media rights and all that sort of stuff. And so they're saying that those other schools shouldn't be on the board of the Pac-12, I guess, for the remainder of this year, into next year, like until they officially leave the conference. So basically saying we should be the ones ruling the roost because we're the only two left, and you guys don't get a say anymore.
Right. And I kind of agree with them. And if they did secure that control, then I would use that control to redistribute the money structure so that they got to keep as much as possible. Because as soon as that contract expires and those obligations no longer exist, then those two schools are going to take a huge negative hit on their compensation. I mean, they're looking at moving from Pac-12 money down to Mountain West money at best.
Right. Yeah. Very true. Very true. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. We'll keep an eye on that as we, continue to see the remnants of this conference realignment shake out. And then the other piece of news, which is a real bombshell that dropped on Saturday, is that Mel Tucker, who's the current head coach at Michigan State, is currently suspended without pay as he goes through a hearing and an investigation because of a phone conversation apparently that he had with this woman who was a rape survivor who he had brought into the program specifically to talk to the team about, being aware of sexual harassment and things of that nature. But apparently he engaged with some sort of sexual acts with her that are now being accused that were not, consensual and all that sort of stuff. So it's a very bad PR look for Michigan State and him personally. Horrible. And real stupid, even if, obviously he's saying he didn't do it or that it was consensual or whatever. So they'll fight that out. But regardless, why would you even get close to anything like that when you've got, a 90 million something contract for multiple years, because he got that big extension from Michigan State when they wanted to keep him because he was maybe going to go to this other school. So they paid for a big extension for him, and he's got a huge amount of money on the table. And I know it's been kind of a mixed bag, right? He's done okay there, but he hasn't done great. So he really shot himself in the foot there.
Yes, he did. It seems like it's a little bit all over the map. I've read articles that indicated that he had kind of admitted to having the phone sex conversation. And then I've also seen an article that says now that officially he's denying that it happened at all. And so, this stuff needs to be worked out, right? There is some kind of an issue, and that has to be resolved. And frankly, there's a burden of proof now that has to play out. But regardless, he shouldn't have put himself in that situation. Like you said, when you have the kind of job and money that you're being compensated like he is, then you needed to protect yourself from that situation. And he did a very poor job of that. The other big factor for me, Alex, is apparently Michigan State University did not know anything about this investigation. That they were informed like around Thursday or Friday about it, and then they were reacting to suspend him on Saturday after the game. Um, so how does MSU not know, right? Like, how are they kept in the dark?
Well, the thing I saw was that this was like she complained, or the complaint was raised in like December of 2022, and it was like
Right.
under investigation since then by Michigan State, but that apparently they didn't get the full details until just this week or something like that, which I don't know how you've been investigating for this many months and not
Yeah.
figured that out. So
Okay.
it's all a little
Well,
confusing, but
it is. Well, so again, I read an article that said they didn't know anything and they were completely blindsided by this, like on Thursday, and that she had complained to the NCAA title through some kind of
oh,
a Title IX thing. And this whole investigation occurred through the NCAA. And if that's true, that's a huge black eye for the NCAA, because how can you not communicate with one of your member schools that you're investigating them, for that long a period of time? So I don't know. There's just a lot of people who are trying to be first with their information, and so there was a bunch of information thrown at the wall, and God knows what's true and what's not. So I think we're gonna have to let the dust settle. But I think no matter how the dust settles, he's ruined at Michigan State, right? So there is going to be, you know, either at some point in the future a negotiated settlement, but in the short term, he's done at Michigan State, and it's just a matter of how much he gets paid or doesn't get paid
right.
when it's all said and done.
Right. Like, yes, technically right now he's just suspended without pay. He's not fired, but I would put the likelihood of him being let go at a high percentage. And if it's proven, it'll be for cause and he won't get paid his full amount, right? Which is obviously
Absolutely.
terrible for him.
Right.
Now, he's been the secondary coach at Michigan State. Harlon Bennett is now the new head coach. And then Mark D'Antonio, who obviously is the former MSU head coach and has been there for a long time, is now stepping back into the staff in some sort of like associate head coach role or assistant role, which I think, it's good that they were able to get him involved, right? Because he's a stabilizing force in this kind of time of chaos over there.
And what did you say his role is going to be then if he's not going to be the head coach?
He's not the head coach. I think I saw like associate, head coach, something
Okay.
along those lines, you know. So he's there to be an advisor, and to help out. But yeah, he's not the top guy.
Interesting. Honestly, that sounds like a train wreck.
You
I
think?
I hate that idea. Oh yeah,
Mm,
because you're bringing in a guy that has all kinds of relationships within the university, that has an enormous amount of loyalty among the fan base, et cetera, et cetera. And so, if you're the guy that's actually named the interim head coach, right? It would be like last year in the Nebraska scenario. Mickey Joseph was named interim head coach, but then they brought Tom Osborne back to oversee Mickey as head coach. You know what I mean? It would have just been like, okay, no, 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 you can't mix that bag.
right,
Either you're gonna give this guy his shot to show what he can do as a head coach, or you're not. By
right,
bringing D'Antonio in, you're mixing old baggage with new baggage. If you understand what I
right.
mean.
Though I would say that's not quite a fair comparison because D'Antonio was let go because he was kind of falling behind the times, right? And Michigan State fans were kind of done with him and were ready for something new. But he still is the winningest head coach in their history, so obviously
Oh
he
yeah,
still has a good reputation overall, I would say.
absolutely. He has a very good reputation overall, and is respected there. But in other ways, at the end of his career, there was some issues off the field with his team and stuff. So he did not leave out of perfect terms. It was a very, um, uh, uh, you know, I don't know, 11th hour kind of announcement that he was leaving, and it was very odd how he departed Michigan State, and it seemed like there was even some bad blood there. So I don't, yeah, I don't like anything about that.
All right. Well, hey, and like we say, let's hope there's some chaos and that Nebraska's able to take advantage of it later in the season. So now focusing on the big national games that have happened, you're talking about some real football here. Obviously, in week one, probably the biggest single game was that Colorado TCU game, which Colorado won 45-42. I predicted that TCU would win 42-28. On a previous podcast, you predicted they would win 35-27 over Colorado. So both of us were wrong. Though I think you expressed more concerns about TCU than I did. So I was definitely caught off guard with their win. Though watching the highlights of the game, they missed a field goal and had two interceptions in the end zone. So frankly, they shot themselves in the foot, and Colorado took advantage, I think, more than anything.
Yep. And I would describe our game with Colorado similarly. Now, I'm not saying we're better than Colorado. We were not. But if we don't turn the ball over, I think we have an opportunity to execute our offense and stay with a much more committed running game that, frankly, keeps us in the mix in that game to the final play.
Mm-hmm. And this was another big game from week one, Florida State LSU. We both predicted that LSU would win. I said 35-28, while you said 42-35. But it was a home game for FSU. It ended up being a beatdown of 45-24. And frankly, that scoreline doesn't really show the game because LSU got a late touchdown, in garbage time when it didn't matter, when the game was decided. So it was really 45-17. And yeah, I was surprised watching the game. There was, LSU did have some mistakes, sure, but it was just a straight up beatdown.
Yes, it was, and it's going to be interesting because that's going to put a great deal of pressure on LSU because they had kind of a odd, start slow and then had some big wins later in the year last year, and so people came into this season with some pretty good optimism that LSU had turned a corner last year, and then to play so poorly, there's going to be pressure to bear on them right away.
Yeah, it was funny. I was looking on Reddit after that game, and I saw a lot of vindictive or happy Notre Dame fans saying, "Oh, it feels so good to watch a Brian Kelly team get beat down" or something like that. So I think there's no love lost with him leaving that program the way he did.
Exactly.
The other last game we predicted on the previous podcast was Utah, Florida. I predicted that Utah would win in a high scoring 38-20, and you predicted they would win 28-21. And ended up being a little lower scoring, 24-11. It was at home for Utah. They definitely looked good in that game, controlling a Florida team that's obviously talented, but they've had their own ups and downs with finding the right coach and things of that nature.
Yes. And they're just so well coached. Utah is year in, year out. Their coach is outstanding. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the year plays out for Utah because they are the defending Big 12 champions, Pac-12 champions.
Yep. And then two other interesting upsets from week one were Clemson playing against Duke. Clemson ranked number 9th in the opening week, lost 28-7. And then Texas State beat Baylor 42-31 with Baylor being at home. The Duke game was at home for Duke, but I watched the highlights of that one, and that looked rough. If I was a Clemson fan, I'd be down in the dumps for sure because it was just constant mistakes in terms of turnovers and penalties and things like that. It was just not what you'd expect from a Dabo Swinney team.
Right. Well, and there's a head scratcher, but then Dabo came back the second week, right, and won huge.
Yes, though I don't think they were playing as big of a team.
Oh no, they were not. It was but my point is that they've got talent, right? It's just that talent wasn't ready to execute in the first week.
You're right. So it looks like they played against Charleston Southern and beat them 66-17. So like you say, it was a beatdown.
Yeah. Right. So it'll be interesting to see the next time that Clemson plays a team that is, reasonably highly regarded. What happens? Because if the problems they encountered in that first game kind of re-show themselves, then the crying fans will emerge quickly for
Yes.
Clemson. But if he rights the ship, then they'll just chalk that one up as an aberration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, he's another one that's kind of interesting who is, under some pressure from his fan base because he's set the standard so high with the dominance they
Right.
had in the, mid to late 2010s. And now he
Well,
hasn't.
like Ohio State, kind of same thing.
Right. Yes. Similar situations where we can say, I think from perspective as Nebraska fans, hey, just be patient, rolling for a new coach is a big gamble. So,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
and then in week 2 of college football, obviously we did not do a podcast last week, so we were not able to do predictions. But I know for a fact that both of us were thinking that the Alabama-Texas game, which was the big game of last week with Alabama playing at home, we thought that Alabama would win against Texas. But in a surprise, Texas ended up winning 34-24. And I would say it was a real showcase of the quarterbacks because Quinn Ewers, who's been at Texas for a few years now, I think he's kind of coming into his own after some struggles earlier in his career. He played a great game, throwing some great passes and good decision making, while Alabama's quarterback, who's young and clearly is a phenom because he's got great speed with his legs and he's threw multiple deep balls for big gains in that game. But then he also threw 2 interceptions and was getting sacked multiple times by Texas. So that was a real difference maker in the game.
Yeah, I feel like Alabama doesn't have their quarterback figured out yet. I mean, they have a problem not nearly as bad as ours, but they have a problem where they have a quarterback who has incredible physical skills, and I'm sure practices really well. Right, he looks great in practice, but then he made some bonehead decisions and some really bad physical throws where his mechanics were just atrocious. And much like the last 14 years for Nebraska. So I think Alabama's going to struggle a little bit until that's resolved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The difference, though, and I don't know exactly what his year is, but I know that he is a young guy. So you can,
Right.
accept some of that, if you've got a younger quarterback who you're trying to develop, knowing that he could become a superstar in the future. The Jeff Sims mistakes, I could accept much more if he was a freshman, but he's a junior, and he's transferring in from another,
Yeah.
top division
Yeah.
program at Georgia Tech and that sort of thing.
Where he started for 2 years.
Exactly. So the mistakes are a lot less excusable for him.
I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. But I caught the end of that game on Saturday, and obviously we dislike Texas here at College Football Throwdown, but I personally hate Alabama even more. So I was glad to see Texas pull it out. And the SEC, between like Alabama losing, LSU losing, Florida losing. Yeah, it's not been a great start for them.
I would agree. I would totally agree.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. Because again, they only, well, this is another example because they all play 4 non-conference games. They all will probably all end up 3-1 in their 4 non-conference games because they don't play anybody in their non-conference games in the SEC. So these losses will be forgotten in large degree by the end of the season if they begin to win. Where when you're in a conference that plays 9 games and you only have 3 non-conference games, you lose one. That's a bigger deal, right? The best you can be is 2-1,
Right.
instead of 3-1. That's a big difference in how those percentages and how that score, record looks to people on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
So
another interesting game I caught the end of on Saturday was Washington State versus Wisconsin, which Washington State won at home and then upset 31-22. And I thought it was cool to see because obviously right there, one of those 2 leftover schools in the Pac-2. And
Yeah.
they were wearing shirts with pirate swords on them because I think their coach has a connection to Mike Leach in the coaching tree and stuff like that. So I thought it was cool to
Well,
see
and
them.
Mike Leach used to be their coach,
Well, there you go.
right? Yeah.
There you go. So yeah, I thought that was a fun game to watch. And Wisconsin had two big fumbles in inopportune moments that I think played a big role in that game, as well as Washington State just playing hard and being really physical. I saw a couple plays in the highlights where they just barreled ahead, through Wisconsin's team and stuff like that.
I see. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I didn't know that score because I was busy with another activity and I didn't get to see the end of that score. I watched the beginning of that game, and my recollection was at the beginning of the game, Wisconsin scored first and looked like they were on their way to a typical, 2-3 touchdown win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, yeah, those fumbles definitely were a big factor. And then a
Wow.
couple other interesting ones we can go over just quickly. Oregon beat Texas Tech, but it was close, 38-30. Miami
Mm.
beat Texas A&M at home, 48-33. Iowa played
Yeah.
against Iowa State, and they won 20-13. And then Kansas beat Illinois from the Big Ten, and they beat them at home 34-23.
Wow. See, and so that points to the fact that we still have a chance, and this is the mentality that Nebraska fans have to embrace. Is that you look at Illinois, you look at Iowa, you look at Wisconsin, and all of a sudden, our Big Ten West peers aren't world beaters, and so if we can just right the ship, get these two W's that we're going to get in the next 2 weeks, and then and make progress as a team, then we still have a chance to get to 6 wins.
Yeah, that was kind of my thinking as well. Um, and then looking at week 3 of college football, there aren't as many big games, but there are a couple that stood out to me. Washington is playing against Michigan State. It's a home game for Michigan State, so obviously with the chaos going on there, that makes a tough game already tougher because Washington's ranked 8th right now in the polls. So we'll have to see if they put up a fight or not. And then LSU, who we just mentioned, lost in week 1, has to play against Mississippi State at home this weekend as well. So that's another one where, you would say LSU should win, but it's definitely not guaranteed.
Right. Well, it's a conference game, and Mississippi State has historically not been one of the preeminent teams of the SEC. So LSU would be expected to win that game. I have a feeling LSU will respond, and they'll play very well in that game and probably beat Mississippi State pretty handily.
Mm-hmm. But I'd say the biggest game and the one that we're going to give a prediction for here is Tennessee, Florida. It is at home for Florida, which gives them a bit of an advantage. But they've had kind of a tough start to their year so far. So what are you thinking about that game?
Tennessee versus Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, I would pick Tennessee, I think, in that one. I don't know that I know enough to give a score, but I feel like it would be pretty high scoring. But Tennessee would end victorious. And even though it's at Florida, you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even with it being away from home, I still think Tennessee's the better team.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well, I was curious, so I just looked it up. So, yeah, they lost to Utah, right, game 1, which we talked about. But then they played against McNeese State, a very difficult opponent, I'm sure. And they crushed them 49-7. So, like you say, clearly they've got some offensive firepower on their side. So, I think, let's see. And then Tennessee, they beat Virginia pretty well in the first game and then beat Austin P 13-30 last week. So I think I'll be a little bit different and just to shake things up. And I'll say that Florida manages to narrowly win in an upset victory.
Okay.
So let's say they win 42 to 35 over Tennessee.
Okay, 42-35. Okay, that's certainly possible. I mean, when you're playing in the swamp, that's a tough place to play. Florida's a way better football team at home.
Mm-hmm. What about you? What's your score?
Well, I said Tennessee would win, and so I would just reverse your score.
Okay, so you think it will be close?
Yeah, I do. I think it'll be close, but I think it'll be high scoring.
Mm-hmm. Just with going the opposite way with Tennessee pulling it out.
Pulling it out. Yep.
Okay, I like that. All right, so we'll see how we do with our predictions. And there's more that we can get into, in the future games. There's already been talk about this new clock rule, with the clock not stopping for resetting the chains on first down and stuff like that. People have already been doing calculations on how much is it actually changing the length of games and how many more commercials are there to fill in that space and stuff like that. So I'd say the overall reaction to that so far is negative, and I'm not a huge fan of it either, but we'll see how it plays out. We'll talk about it more, I'm sure, as the season goes on.
Right. Well, yeah, we gave our assessments of that, and I think both of us agreed that these were some foolish rule changes that, frankly, were driven by people who claimed that they wanted to shorten the game, but all they did was reduce the quality of the sport because it dramatically reduces the number of plays. So I think it creates fewer opportunities for the dramatic come from behind victories and things of that nature, because it's going to be harder for a team that stumbles early in a game to come back from that stumble, because the clock will not work in their favor as much, and things of that nature. I think that's what will be the result. It will not make the game shorter. The TV programming stations will still overrun, and you'll still miss the first half of the first quarter of the second game of the day, because those guys are going to fill up whatever the shortened time is with more commercials. So the length of a game won't change ultimately, and it'll still push beyond the into the 3:30 window as they have historically done.
Right. Yep. And the NCAA folks, when they announced those changes, did say that they're willing to evaluate how it goes for a few years and potentially reverse the changes and things like that. So it's just the first 2 weeks. We'll see how it plays out, but I think it's good to make your voices known if you don't like it, so that hopefully it convinces the NCAA to reverse when the time comes.
Yeah. Well, in all likelihood, if they wait too long, the NCAA won't be involved, because I think that's an organization that has a very short window of life left in it.
You may be right about that, but we'll call it there. Thank you all for listening to this episode of College Football Throwdown. If you enjoyed listening, you could reach out to us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also find us if you search for College Football Throwdown on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can leave us a review there or a comment. We always love hearing from the fans. So thank you all for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.